I just came back from a lovely 3-week holiday in Japan. We visited family, we went snowboarding, went to numerous temples, to the point where, well, let's just say I won't be going to another temple for at least 2 or 3 months. I'm all templed out. But anyway, yeah, I had a lot of fun during this trip. However, I didn't play as much chess as I probably should have. The reason being, all I had to play chess on was my very small tablet, my phone. Um, and usually when I was playing, it was on public transport, such as trains, buses, taxis. Um, and anyway, while I was traveling, my mindset was completely different because there were all these sounds, there was, different environments, uh, questionable smells from family members. uh, the usual. It was really difficult to concentrate on my game, and so my playing suffered. And, well, I could barely even beat a 13 to 1400 rated player. I was having difficulty, even with that low level of chess. And the experience was infuriating. Um, so I decided that after about 6 or 7 games of just losing against low-rated players, I'd give it a break. And so what I did for the rest of the trip was do puzzles. I can't say I was much better at it. I lost about 150 rating points. Um, but I think that's still better than not doing anything at all. And anyway, this is my first game after playing after this 3-week long holiday. Um, I was expecting it to go a lot worse. I eventually won. It wasn't a pretty win, but um, it wasn't the worst game I've ever played. I decided to play against someone who is mediocre. 1771 isn't too high, isn't too low. I thought, I'd ease my way back into it. This game, by the way, was played on my PC back at home in my own room, where I'm used to the conditions. So I was completely concentrated. Um, my only the only thing holding me back was the time spent away from chess. So let's get started. E4, E5. Now, when your opponent plays a passive move like this to allow the bishop to come out, you want to try and open up the position, hence d4 was played. They played their knight, developing it in a way that attacks a pawn, a central pawn, so you might as well defend it, with a developing move such as knight c3, which I did. Bishop comes out to allow castling, however, it is blocked by this knight, so they'll want to move it in the future. I played bishop here to attack this weak f7 square and also to develop a piece so I can castle. They played castle, castle. A6 is played to allow for this b5 move. I wasn't exactly frightened of it. Instead I played f4, trying to allow for this this pawn push on e5. This would allow the knight, well, this would kick the knight. It would also open up this diagonal, so that when this is played, the bishop can fall back to a square where it's useful. So this is exactly what happens. I brought it back to the useful square. Pushed e5 despite my knight being under attack. The reason being, if they take my knight, I take their knight, they take mine, I take their bishop, and suddenly their queen's under attack. So, it would not be wise for them to continue. Anywho, they took my knight. Oh, whoops. Oh, jeez. Hate it when that happens. Press one wrong button. Whole game's reset. We've gone too far. Alright, so. They took my knight. I took their knight. Bishop takes to avoid this continuation of the trade. Now, as you can see, they now have two very weak pawns that happen to be on the same row file. So that means that they are not only doubled, but they are also isolated, because look, they don't have any pawns to support them. So they're all alone on this single file. So in order to keep these guys weak, we need to take advantage of this central square. And we need to keep this pawn intact, because if this dies, then these are actually a strength. They're no longer that dangerous. What they'll want to do is they'll want to protect it so that in the endgame there'll be nothing, no pawns to stop these pawns from getting through. They'll be passed pawns, not isolated anymore. I didn't want to lose my knight, so I moved it to a more aggressive square. Again, I didn't... Oh, it's happened again. Alright. I didn't really care so much about this, so I just moved my queen here, reason being, if they take, checkmate. They developed their knight, sensibly. I moved my rook here, which was a mistake. My thinking was, if I could develop this, double the rooks, then I would be able to put my rook in here. The queen wouldn't be able to take, because there's a rook attacking on that square, or defending on that square, so rook would have to take. At which point the defender of this square would be removed, which is what I wanted, so that, you know, I could try and attack. But this wasn't very well thought out, and it turns out once this has been distracted, there isn't actually a way to checkmate, especially as the rook would be staring down my rook after it's taken. So once I do get into this position, there's a point where there are no checks, and then the rook takes this rook, and well, it's a drawn position. So anyway, I didn't calculate all the way through, which is one of my weaknesses. I need to work on that. And, well, I did spend a lot of time calculating this series of moves, which was also a mistake, because if you can look over here, this is the time control, 10 plus 0, so it's a very, very fast game, hence rapid. You can't really dwell on things for too long, or else you will lose on time. And, well, it kind of slipped my mind. I went into the zone, I started concentrating, and then when I looked back up, about 4 minutes had passed, and I only had, well, about 4 minutes left. So I got into some time problems. After this point, I decided I'd try and trade off all my material. The reason I played b4 was so that the only defender of this piece would be kicked out of the way. However, I missed this move right here. Queen goes here, we take, they go here. The only move to defend from checkmate is to play rook here, at which point they can play the brilliant move d3, not only attacking the defender of this square, but also opening up the diagonal for the bishop, and attacking this rook. So therefore, one of these rooks has to die, because, well, this is attacking this, and this is attacking this. You can only move one, move one piece at a time, so there goes my advantage. I didn't see this line, and luckily my opponent didn't either. They decided to play d3 immediately. I took, they took, I took, and we are now equal in material. I have a bishop, they have a rook, I have a rook, bishop, rook, queen, queen, and it's fairly equal. They are up in advantage by only a little bit. They took my pawn, which was a tempo killer. I shouldn't have done that. My headset just died on me. Now, at this point, I had barely any time left, so I had to try and lay a little trap so that my opponent would get confused, hopefully, because they weren't doing so well on the clock either. I played rook e3, which on the surface looks like you can just play bishop here, which pins the rook to the king. That's exactly what happens, and I played this move right here. Queen e4, checking the king and attacking the bishop at the same time. There's no way to defend this bishop now, and it is dead. So, basically, this was not a good move, but they did fall for it, and it worked out in the end. So, I'm not happy with it, but it did work. I don't mind. I checked with the rook. Now after the king goes here, which is the only move apart from queen sacrifice, which is the best move, queen goes here. Checkmate. So therefore, the only way to stop checkmate, well, to immediately stop checkmate, queen takes, pawn takes queen, and then what we want to do is basically after the rook, you know, tries to stop the queening pawn, we go here, I suppose. Let's turn on the computer actually. What does it recommend? Probably, yeah, sacrifice or go here. Either way, it results in checkmate, and there's no way to survive. So, from this point onwards, it was a forced variation. Um, it wasn't the best game, as you can see here. My advantage was, above those for the beginning of the game, not by much. Then it started to shift a little bit. At this point, I think we can learn that e5 was not a good move. I shouldn't have tried to open up so aggressively. Um, let's see, we equalized after they took my knight. I was lucky about that. Let's see if they did go here, then what? I would have to move my knight out of the way, and we'd have lost some pawns. It wouldn't have been so good. So we equalized after they took my knight, and thank God for that. Then we started to descend into darkness. That wasn't so good, and at this point we blundered. Um, yeah, I agree that was not a good move. The reason I did this was because I saw a variation where I could trade off all the pieces, and I didn't see the variation where they can push d3 later when the rook is here and the queen is here, threatening checkmate. I didn't see this line, neither did my opponent, and I'm glad that I was facing up against someone who wasn't strong enough to see this. So, anyway, not a bad game, but I can't say I'm proud of it. For a first game back though, after 3 weeks, it's acceptable. I can't say more.